All right, welcome to the Highly Addictive Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Josh.
And we got Jay with us tonight. We're really excited to have you here. Just before we get into it, I wanted to mention a couple things. I wanted to thank Dave, Johnny Cash, Petit? I don't know, man. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name, but I wanted to thank you for hooking us up with a microphone. We've been asking people if they want to donate for a local fundraiser that we're doing around town, putting some gift baskets together to raise money for audio-visual equipment. And Dave was like, I like what you guys are doing, and I'm going to give you a microphone. So thank you so much, brother, for helping us out like that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave.
And so we are going to be raising donations, funds, gifts, whatever, to put some gift baskets together to raffle off to raise money for our audio visual equipment. So just putting that out there. But we should get into it. Jay is a dude, busy guy. You got some bands, you got your own radio show, you own your own business, and and still managed to find time to get involved with recovery. You seem pretty passionate about it.
As best I can, anyway. I think I sound busier than I am. I don't know. People ask me what I do, and I list the shit that I do. It makes me sound busier than I am, but I don't know that I'm actually that busy. I don't know.
Stay busy. No, I think that's a big part of recovery. You got to stay busy doing something.
I find the more stuff that I do, the easier it gets. You know what I mean? The more that I take on, usually you'd think the exact opposite would be true, but the more stuff that I do, the more I'm able to manage it. I don't know. It's weird.
I think that makes sense. Like you get used to having all this stuff on your plate.
Yeah.
And there's not as much time to procrastinate.
It's also bad for your brain though sometimes because like shutting it off.
Oh, I hear you.
My girlfriend knows. Like I'll be like I'll be talking about something and then I'll bring up something that's completely polar opposite. She'll be like, okay, where did that come from? I'll be like, I don't know. It's been in my brain going around and around and around.
That just means your creative personality type. You think laterally. Yeah, for sure. So, man, I guess usually what we do is like to start off, we kind of ask people like talk a little bit about their story, like where did addiction start for you? When did you kind of realize you were fucked, kind of thing?
I think I've always been fucked pretty much, but in a good way, really. My family history and lineage sort of set the stage, I think, for me going down the road I did. My dad's dad, my grandfather, was born in Cobble Hill. He was born Christmas Day 1900. His name was fucking Chris. I can swear, right?
Oh yeah, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah. Okay, so his name. Cause I'm on my radio show's live, right? So I've had guests swear before, and I'm always like, dude, keep it reeled in.
No, we swear excessively.
That's why I like podcasts, because usually you can just kind of have.
Fuck yeah.
So he was born Christmas Day 1900. His name was fucking Christmas, and he lived in Oak Bay in Victoria. And in the late 30s, he ran for as a Liberal Party representative in a local election. And my understanding of the story goes, he sold or mortgaged or remortgaged part of his farm, the family farm, in order to fund his campaign. And at the last minute, the Liberal Party decided to pull him out and went with somebody else. He was all distraught, and he went into the Royal Bank on Oak Bay Avenue with a handgun and demanded his money back, and not disguised, and they knew who he was. He actually banked with that bank up until he died in 1996. And he got 5 years in the BC pen for bank robbery. My brother and him, my dad and his brother were born after he got out, and they got into crime at an early age, stealing cars at age 12. And my dad went to juvie at age 12. My uncle in the 70s did a Brinks robbery in Toronto and shot and killed a guy. He got 25 years, did a life sentence. My dad and my uncle both spent time in the BC pen. In June of 1969, my dad brought up 13 pounds of pot from Eugene, Oregon, in the door panels of his friend of his car. Got busted in Royal Oak. His partner, the story is his partner ratted him out because the cops pulled him over and unscrewed the door panels and knew where the pot was hidden. He got busted with 13 pounds. It was the biggest pot bust on Vancouver Island in Vancouver Island history at that point.
Wow. And
they gave my dad 5 years for 13 pounds of pot. My mom was like 6 months pregnant with my brother at the time. And they wanted to give him the Crown prosecutors and the Victoria Police at the time were trying to get him on conspiracy to import because they knew where it came from. And that came with a 15-year sentence. That's what they wanted to give him.
Holy shit.
So as you can see, like it was kind of like a chronological career criminal family history. And my dad was a biker. He was a part of a motorcycle club called the Bounty Hunters in the late 70s and the early 80s in Vancouver. And back then there was lots of small motorcycle clubs, and that was sort of the peak of the biker sort of culture. And there was a larger local club that started to amalgamate all the smaller clubs, and so there was some affiliation with that. But that was the kind of home that I grew up in, was like, you know, any typical night would be like, you know, 10 bikers at my parents' house, and you know, I could hear the bikes coming down the road. And so we were that family in the neighborhood that was like stood out like a sore thumb. My dad was like 6'4". He was a sergeant at arms at the club that he rode with, so my dad was like the enforcer, and he was a big fucking dude. And unfortunately he had a drinking problem and a substance abuse problem, and he used to take it out on my mom. You know, one of my earliest memories is my dad beating the fuck out of my mom when my brother and I were in the bathtub. I remember my brother and I crying in the bathtub. I could hear my dad just like hammering on my mom. And so that sort of set the stage for that feeling of not only not belonging, but that never know what's going to happen next sort of feeling inside, right?
Yeah, I mean...
And I think anybody that's in recovery or has suffered through active addiction knows what that feels like, right? And so another thing that also happened through that is as like most kids, your dad's your hero, right? And you know, I swore at a young age I would never treat women the way my dad did, but despite his fucking awful behavior and the way he treated my mom, my dad was my hero, right? I fucking loved him unconditionally, and he could do no wrong in my eyes. And you know, so growing up, I saw some of the things my dad was doing, and I was like, I want to do what my dad does. And my brother, I got a brother who's 5 years older than me, and he was a straight A student, ran for student body, president, you know, like student council president, like was fucking honor roll, like super nerdy, preppy guy. My brother took a look at what my dad was doing and was like, I don't want to fucking do that. That's not going to be my path in life. My brother realized early on, because most of our money went to my dad's drug addiction, or like just my dad partying, and so we didn't have a lot of the things that other kids in the neighborhood had. And so my brother realized if he wanted nice things in life, he had to work for it. So my brother started working from age 12. He worked at a local video store in Esquimalt in Victoria, and I kind of followed my dad's path, because I remember we'd go to the grocery store and my dad would just start eating shit off the shelf. He'd like be cracking walnuts with his hand and eating it, and I knew he didn't pay for that shit. So what he was teaching me is that if you wanted something, it was okay just to take it. That was fine to do. And even though I remember getting caught for stealing and like getting fucking spanked like severely and being told like stealing is not okay, but you know, my parents are sending me mixed messages because my mom's married to my dad. My dad's fucking ripping shit off in the grocery store and eating it. And so I'm like, okay, so on one hand you're telling me I can't fucking steal shit, but like...
But the example he's setting is basically
totally, right?
You take stuff by will, and it was about like, you know, using... It sounds like, using intimidation and fear.
Totally.
Like,
I mean, later on I hear stories like my uncle, my Uncle Glenn, my dad's brother, he would take my dad over to my dad would be like, oh, I need some dope, right? So he'd take him to his dealer's house, and so he introduced me, hey, this is my brother Brock, and so they'd buy their dope and leave, and then the next time my Uncle Glenn went over to buy dope off the guy, they'd be like, what the fuck, your brother came back an hour later and fucking beat the fuck out of me and took all my dope. Like, so my dad would just go back and rob the dudes. And my uncle, you know, I did it to my uncle all the fucking time. Jesus. My uncle's like, fucking stop doing that. So people would start telling me.
All my connects,
people would be like, don't tell your fucking brother where I live. Like, that was like a thing, right? And there was fuck all anybody could do about it, right? Because my dad was a part of this motorcycle club and also huge. And so that's just what he did. He just took what he wanted. And so as I got older and went through high school, I mean, I was also like a kind of an awkward kid. I grew really fast, and I was kind of almost as tall as I am now, like before any of my friends. I was redhead, so I was a skinny, tall, redheaded kid that grew up in an abusive, drug-addicted biker home, right? So I felt like socially awkward early on, right? I was always like, oh, what the fuck? And I wasn't able to have friends over and stay overnight and stuff because you never knew what my dad was going to do.
Yeah.
I remember there was a couple of occasions, 2 occasions that I can remember ever. One of my friends in grade 3 stayed over, and of course my dad came home wasted and started fucking with my mom, and the cops came, and then we had to call that kid's parents, and they had to come pick him up. Like, it was super shitty. I remember me and him being upstairs and like hearing my parents getting into it, and me just being like, fuck. And then another time, my cousin, my mom's brother's kid, came over, and the same thing. My dad started beating the shit out of my mom. The cops came, and my mom's brother had to come get him, and it was like super traumatic for those fucking poor kids. So that was like the end of like no sleepovers, know anything for their own safety, but like also for like, you know, when their parents.
Well, it's interesting you're saying like it's super traumatic for those kids, but like
super
you're living
traumatic
that.
for me. Oh, 100%, right?
And that kind of sounds like that's what's setting the stage for addiction. It's not just the fact that
100%
that your family's like, and your dad especially is using drugs and abusing alcohol and drugs, but just it seems like that's kind of a telltale sign for addicts. Like
trauma,
you said,
right?
all of that stuff, trauma, anxiety, not feeling, not being able to fit in, social awkwardness, all that kind of stuff.
Totally, and I
not feeling, feeling less than kind of thing.
100%. The fucked up thing is our family was close, so I never felt unloved, like ever. Like, you know what? Like my family was super affectionate. My parents always told me they loved me. I never felt like there was times I felt like we didn't have our needs met because we absolutely didn't. But we didn't go hungry. But there was certain things like, you know, earmarked things that like kids get that we didn't get, right? And so I felt less than because my friends got those things, right? And we didn't because, you know, my dad spent our money on other shit. But I didn't ever felt unloved. That wasn't my issue. I knew my parents loved me, and my grandparents were always there for us and stuff. My brother might have told a different story. I think he might have felt moments of being unloved, but for sure, looking back, I never felt unloved. I knew my parents fucking loved me. They were just doing the best they could with like shitty parenting skills passed on by their parents. Because my grandparents, you know, my dad. If you think about, like what I said, my dad's parents were born in like the early 1900s, and my granddad was born fucking 1900. So he went through World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam fucking War, the Great Depression. Like they went through some hardcore fucking shit, right? So their set of values and mentality and the way they raised their kids was flawed, right? Because they went through some fucking traumatic shit, right? So that's passed on to my parents, and you know, my mom's parents immigrated from Denmark. And when they came to Canada, they moved to Victoria in, I think it was the early 50s. I mean, my granny didn't even speak fucking English. She just spoke Danish. And she had no education, and she was like a stay-at-home wife. So you can imagine, like, back then, like, the way that you were raised and how you got your survival skills was a little different than what we got, right? Like, I mean...
Oh, yeah.
When you were growing up, like, was the... like you were saying, like you were getting in trouble for stealing, but you're watching your dad steal. Like, were you getting disciplined by your mom or your dad mostly?
Both. Yeah.
Both, yeah.
Yeah, we got spanked. It was either like the wooden spoon or like we had this fucking, my mom sold Avon for a while. I don't know if you know Avon makeup, right? And there was like this plastic back scratching brush. It was about this long and it had this fucking flower emblem on the back of it. And it was like for scratching or washing your back or whatever, right? And it would hang on the back of somewhere in the bathroom. There was like a hook, and depending on how severe the punishment was, my brother and I would compare the mark of the fucking flower pattern on our ass because it was pretty deep, right? So it had a bit of fucking recoil on it, so like
because it's plastic, so it's bending shit,
And so we'd get hammered with that thing, and then our parents they'd always say to me, "This is gonna hurt me more than it's gonna hurt you," and I was like, "No, I don't think."
You're like,
that's
"Nah,
true."
I just don't buy that."
Looking back, I get what they meant. But one thing that my parents always did is before they disciplined us, they'd explain why, and then afterwards they would they would let us know, hey, that was hard for us too, but you need to understand what you did was wrong. So I never felt fucking abused, you know what I mean? But like, you know, arguably like, you know, hitting me with a fucking Avon brush and leaving a mark on my ass, is it abuse? Like I don't know. I probably had it coming, right? Like we were bad kids, right? Like
yeah, I mean probably by today's standard, but like you said, it's an interesting dynamic that people will kind of fail to realize is that. For the longest time and up until the last 20, 30 years, like that was how like people didn't have self-awareness. People generally don't talk about their feelings that much. It's just how people, especially like people depression era, you know, all of our grandparents and stuff like that, like yeah, that was how life was.
Well, I think people raise their kids a little bit differently now too. Mm-hmm. I mean, we got treated like little adults, and I think that was super beneficial. I mean, my girlfriend, the way that she raises her kid is she teaches her adult things, and you can see how well-rounded and balanced her kid is. I mean, that's fucking good parenting. And I think a lot of parents back then, they didn't understand that's how it worked, and they would just fucking beat on their kids and try to beat sense and sensibility into them. And so, you know, you get spanked fucking nonstop because they didn't really have those, like, let's explain things to you skills. But I think sometimes, I mean, yeah, but sometimes I had it coming for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but that was like what we were talking about earlier before we started recording was like that kind of like tough love approach versus, you know what I mean, this understanding, compassion approach. And like, yeah, the tough love approach has been the dominant kind of tool.
Totally.
Just in not just in dealing with people with addiction, dealing with addicts, like just dealing discipline in general, family, criminal wise, like that has been the kind of the standard for up until, you know, recently.
Well, they're starting to examine that now. I mean, we can talk more about that later. But I mean, I remember the worst thing that I ever felt was I stole a bunch of my dad had a Cadillac in El Dorado, like an I don't know, probably late 70s one. It was like mint leather interior, white leather interior, like friggin' wash that car like twice a week kind of shit. And he'd save quarters in this roll top desk that we had. And so I jacked a bunch of his quarters and went to what's now Walmart. It was Woco back then. I bought these, like, they weren't G.I. Joes, but they were like G.I. Joes and they had like real clothes and stuff. And I bought a bunch of those. And then my mom found out, or he came home and then kind of was like, holy fuck, I'm missing a bunch of change. And I remember I was playing in the yard. My mom came out and she's like, your dad knows you fucking stole from him. Like, you're fucked, eh? And I was like, I remember being terrified. And he came home and he's like, I want to talk to you. And he's like, I'm really disappointed in you. I can't believe you fucking stole from me. And I was waiting to get the spanking of a lifetime. And he walked away. He didn't talk to me for the rest of the day, and that was way fucking worse.
Right.
I would have way rather got the fucking spanking and then had him be cool with me after that, and the whole fucking day, like, he ignored me, and I was just like, I was fucking devastated. That was, I felt abused because of that, not because of the
because
fucking,
because you were just like,
I would have way rather had the fucking emblem on my ass than fucking have my dad not talk to me.
The shame and
Right?
neglected.
Did it ever get to a point like where it got to like more physical than a spanking, like between you and your dad? Like, you ever get in a fight with him or
when he was selling dope and I owed one of his runners money, he punched me in the head. Yeah, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like post adolescence kind of
Yeah,
thing.
but no, he never physically punched me. No, not growing up ever. Just one time in my life ever, and that was that time. And I was fucking in my 30s and early 30s.
Did you just kind of fall in love with drugs and alcohol off the bat, and then what was the first time like?
And so I kind of like was like I got into skateboarding at 11, and that was like I fell in love with skateboarding, and started like sort of all of like the same things every kid does. You know, I tried smoking weed at 12 for the first time. Didn't really do much for me the first time I smoked it, and then I started smoking it periodically in 8th grade. And I used to get super fucking stoned. I didn't really even like it that much, but everyone else was doing it. And then as I built my tolerance up, then I became a chronic pot smoker and liked it. But I mean, the first 5 or 6 times I smoked weed, like I got so fucking stoned. Like I don't even think I liked it. Like I was just like, this is fuck. Like I felt like I was flying. You know, like how fucked up you get. Right?
Yeah, I definitely identify that with being like so paranoid and full of anxiety. You're like, I spent the whole time worrying about hiding, you know what I mean? People finding out and hiding shit. You're like, why was this?
There were moments that were fun, but the first couple of times I remember, I was like, this is fucked. And then I did acid and mushrooms for the first time when I was 15. And it wasn't like I was like, you know, it wasn't like people say or like, you know, the propaganda you get. Like you're gonna.
You didn't see leprechauns or any kind of shit.
I hallucinated, but like I wasn't hooked, right? It wasn't like we were doing it every day. I mean, we did acid a lot in high school, but it was like something I could take or leave. It's not like I couldn't, you know. And alcohol.
There's no compulsion and shit. Yeah.
No, and alcohol was the same. I mean, we had a rule within our crew of guys. There was like 6 of us that hung out all the time and skated together. We'd drink on the Friday or the Saturday, but not consecutive nights. That was like our fucking rule. And then the other night we'd buy weed and we'd smoke weed. We'd smoke weed probably on both nights, but like, you know, it was like one or the other. We didn't drink 2 nights in a row. And that's just how we did things. And, you know, with alcohol for me, I could always sort of take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I drank alcoholically, but it was by choice, not by obsession. You know, like I could have a drink and walk away and I wouldn't drink the bar dry every time. Or I never really with alcohol said I'm never drinking again, and then had the obsession of the mind that took over and you know, inadvertently was sitting at the end of the bar in handcuffs. Like, how did this happen again? But then, so yeah, and then at 16 I snorted cocaine for the first time. While I was on mushrooms, we went to UVic in Victoria. Used to skate there all the time, and we split a bunch of mushrooms, me and a couple of my friends, and snorted coke, and that was it. Like, it was one time thing, and it was like, don't tell anybody. It was like, because nobody was into that shit, so it was like super low key, and we were like, it was fucking amazing. I loved it, but I was like, just walked away, right? I was like, it's good. I we didn't talk about doing it again, or
Yeah, you don't bring it up at your.
it wasn't a thing. It's just like it was like our secret. We thought
PE or something.
We
Yeah.
thought it was amazing. We're like, that was fucking dope, but like, don't tell anybody. Would keep it low key because people were like, "What, you did coke? What the fuck is wrong with you?" Right? It wasn't cool.
It wasn't. Yeah, no. It's
Like, it
not
wasn't something
supposed
we were into bragging about because nobody would have thought we were cool for doing it. They would have thought we were fucking fucked up. And then the first time I did crack was when OJ was getting chased in his Bronco.
to. So that was 1990. Was that 99?
92, I think. It was
92.
July of 92, I think. Was it 92 or 94? I don't know. We need like a Joe Rogan fucking.
Yeah, I'm not
Bring it up with this. Bring it up
I
with
should
this.
should be googling it. All right.
yeah.
I'll-
Well, me and my buddy from high school, Misha Wilkin, I'm gonna say his name. We went down to Seattle, and we rented a room on South Jackson, and it was kind of in a ghetto area. We didn't realize that we were just kids. And, I mean, Google wasn't even a thing.
October 2nd. Oh, that's when they decided the murder case.
I think
it was
it was
1995, so it must have been.
I think it might have been 94 because I just turned 19, so it must have been 94.
Okay.
And so we stayed in this motel, and as soon as we got into the motel and checked in, the phone rang. I looked the phone on the wall, and I'm just that guy. I'm like, hey, what's up? And
Like, OJ's getting chased, dude.
and the guy was like, oh, hey, what's up? Is this so and so from the other night? I'm like, no, it's his buddy. You know, I'm just fucking playing, and I'm like, what's happening? He goes, nothing yet. He goes, but in 10 minutes something will be happening. He goes, I'll call you back, and he called back in like 8 minutes, and he goes, come on down to the room. I'm hooked up, and I didn't know what the fuck he meant, right? And we're like, let's go. And we'd bought 40s. Right, because 40s were a thing then, and we had some St. Ides and some little bottles of Mickey's. I don't know if you guys know Mickey's, malt liquor, right? And so we thought we were wearing like LA hats and shit, right? And so we rolled down a buddy's room, and there was we knocked on the door, and he opened it, and he's all confused looking because we were like kids, and I'm like, listen, we don't know who you are. I'm just fucking around, but we're from Canada, we're Canadians, and we just want to hang out. He's like, oh, come on in. And he's like, have you ever tried this? And he had this little, looked like a brick. It was about that big. And we're like, no, what is it? And he's like, it's raw cocaine. He's like, you guys want some? And we're like, fuck it, sure.
Yeah.
So we smoked some with him, and I remember the first hoot that I did, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, and I immediately looked at him. I'm like, you got to give my buddy one of those. I was like, it was like kind of like what they say. It was almost like I touched God. Like it was like the fucking best feeling I'd ever experienced. I was like, it was like, oh, like
Yeah,
it was like, holy fuck, that was fucking good.
So like
Interesting.
at the time, like when he tells you it's raw cocaine and you smoke it, like did you know that you're smoking crack, or
Yeah,
like,
for
you're just
sure.
like, oh, it's just like
We were just like, whatever, right?
Coke or,
Yeah, we knew it.
So that's
For sure.
interesting, man.
Yeah.
That's the story that you generally, and it was weird because that was kind of the opposite for me. I always like doing lines, but I had one experience smoking crack, and I just didn't hit it for me the same way.
I think
But-
it helped the setting too. We're in Seattle,
Yeah.
OJ's getting chased. We're drinking 40s. This guy's got crack. We're like, fuck, let's do it, right? Like, I'm really big on like I'm nostalgic and I'm a romantic, right? So I like stories, right? I like I like buying things that have a history, right? I like old furniture and I like weird shit and some of the stuff in our house is a bit like when we first started dating, she came over to my house the first time. I was like,
But I think that's a common thread among addicts in general. Is like we romanticize these memories, these experiences,
Yeah.
and make them out to be this kind of grandiose thing,
Right.
And that just kind of feeds into this delusion of ours.
Well, I think addicts too are really great at forgetting the bad parts, only remembering the key good parts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like we forget parts of the story. And I mean, anybody that's in recovery or has had bouts of recovery can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Our mind forgets how fucking bad it was, right? And, well, yeah, it's not so bad. And so yeah, we smoked crack and then we went home the next day and that was the end of it. Like it's not like I was hooked on crack. I didn't want to smoke crack again. It never came up. I never looked for it. It wasn't. It was fine. And we told people, we're like, oh yeah, we smoke crack, and people were like, you guys are fucked. We're like, it was rad. We loved it. It was dope.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Was like going into that situation. Like, did you have any reservations about smoking crack in terms of like, because I know when I was like tried coke a few times or whatever, I was like, oh, like this is like pretty fucked up. It was actually kind of like the experience you guys were saying with like smoking weed. Like I was just like, this is too fucked, but like I kind of wanted to do more, and like I was just like fucking super paranoid. And I just remember like a few buddies of mine did crack, and I was the guy that was like, oh, you're fucked. Like, I'll never do that, even though it's like I was just doing cocaine, And like, did you have any sort of thing like that where you're like, oh, I should never do crack or anything like that in your head, like going into that?
Probably. But like in that instance, like that didn't cross my mind. I think I figured it was a one-off thing, and you don't, when you're younger, you don't think of the consequences. And I was always that guy that was like, I am different than everyone else. I have overwhelming evidence in my family history that if you commit crimes and do drugs at any level, there's severe consequences. And but I was like, that's their experience, not mine. And so I was a stubborn kid, and still am in a lot of ways, and always want to experience things for myself first. So I was like, fuck it, let's smoke some crack. And I had zero regrets and gave zero fucks, and looking back, still don't regret it. I had fun that night. It was a good time.
Well, at least you can be honest about that. I think that's one thing that reaches people, is as much as we try and get away from it, and that's why I think that part of this needs to be the war stories, is that we have to make peace with the fact that not every time we did drugs was the worst time ever, and people are trying to say, oh, like my best day using was still not as good as my worst day. Like, that's fucking bullshit.
I always say that.
You know what I mean? Like that's just being honest reaches people, that so that you can say, I relate to you. Like I understand what the allure is, what the attraction is, but you have to remember, like, these are what you're gonna face consequences, and then ain't nothing nice. You know what I mean? Like
totally. And then after that there was periodically like people in my peer group started doing harder drugs like smoking crack, and a lot of my friends got into selling dope at that point, and so did I. And we just sold powder, right? Like it was just like what we did. I sold dope to people that worked in bars in the nightclub industry, and I started getting in the nightclub industry. Started DJing at 20. I'd been DJing for a couple of years, like little house parties and stuff, but I actually started working in the clubs at 20, and started managing a nightclub in Victoria on Broad Street at 20 years old, and started a hip hop night on Wednesday nights. It was super busy, and so I got into what I realized then, because I was like the entertainment manager at this club. And so I did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and then Friday and Saturday we had Top 40. So at 20 years old, I had my own office in a nightclub, and we had unlimited bar tabs, so I just drank like as much as I wanted. And the more I drank, obviously the drunker I got. So what I discovered is the more cocaine I sniffed, the more I could drink. And it was like the equalizer.
It is, yeah.
I was like, this is amazing. So I just did tons of coke and drank tons, and then I had friends that sold dope, and so it just sort of all fit in together. And
you just kind of just license.
And there was people like in my peer group, especially my brother's friends. I remember this one girl, Sonia. We were living on by Mayfair Mall in Victoria on Speed Avenue, and ironically, and I remember after the bar one night we were trying to go pick up, and we were in a cab trying to look for my buddy Ray's house. Driving around in a cab for so long, we're kind of obsessing about it, right? I remember her crying, and she stopped me out front of my house. She's like, Jay, you're going down a fucked up path. She's like, you need to stop. Like, she was in tears, like, pleading with me. I'm like, Sonia, I'm like, you need to fucking chill out. Like, I'm good. Like, we're partying. Like, what the fuck? This is what you do when you party, right?
I mean, you're not seeing it. You're basically like, she saw it, but you can't see it now, and it's, you're just, in your mind, you're just like, yeah, I'm a 20-year-old kid, and I'm managing, like, I'm doing awesome. I'm managing a bar, I get to party all the time, like.
Totally. And she knew my family history, too, a little bit, and so I think that was part of her fear. And I even remember the owner of the nightclub, Jack Weeks, a super fucking great guy, pulled me aside one night, and he ordered us a Heineken each, and we sat down, and he's like, Jay, man, he goes, you are a fucking sweetheart of a human being. He goes, but your friends are dragging you down. Because your friends are taking you down a road that you're not going to be able to turn around from eventually. He goes, you need to fucking get rid of your friends. And I was just like, you know what, Jack, fuck you. I was like, I love you, man, but like these are my boys. This is my family. Like, you telling me to get rid of my friends? Like, I'm like, it's not going to happen, man. Like, I appreciate what you're saying, but fucking don't say that shit again. And looking back, like, he was fucking right. Like my peer group had a major influence in a lot of my decision making. And, looking back, would I have gone down the same road that I went down without them? I don't fucking know. I don't care, but I mean, maybe not, right?
I don't see. That's what's interesting for me is like, do you think anybody, like, do you think you could have gone back if you had the chance to talk to 20-year-old you, or if you think if your dad had said something along those lines, do you think anybody could have reached you at that point, or do you think you had to go through what you went through to have those realizations?
That's
right?
$1 million question, though, right? I mean, even like I on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I teach a class with the kids at two different schools in Nanaimo, at Woodlands and at Barsby, with a learning alternative program. And some of the stuff I say I can tell reaches them, but those kids are going to do what they're going to do. I can't friggin' stop them, right? But I might plant a seed. And so looking back, like people planted seeds, like that dude in that conversation with the Heinekens sticks with me to this day, right? My friend Sonia crying and pleading with me out front of my house sticks with me to this day. Did it make a difference? It fucking sure didn't, right?
You still had to go through what you needed to go through.
But in my darkest moments, I fucking remember that voice, right? And him sitting down with me and saying, I love you, man, you're a good person. So like that kind of shit stuck with me. So that made a difference, I think, in maybe keeping me a little bit feeling like not such a piece of shit in those, I feel like a piece of shit moments, but I still made those choices. Right?
Yeah, and it took you like another decade to get clean. It sounds like, right?
Yeah, about 10, 12 years.
Yeah, like that's kind of like the premise of like our when did you get fucked, or when you were fucked question. It's like on the one hand, when you're fucked in terms of just like a person, but when you're fucked, like when you needed to stop doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? And so it kind of brings it full circle in terms of all those instances you were talking about, we're only at 20 and it took another decade to kind of realize where you were.
But you're still having fun at 20. You're not seeing it as a problem. You're just seeing it
no, because I still paid my rent. I was selling weed, and I was making money DJing and doing club nights, right? So I didn't lack for anything really. I mean, I wasn't really building a future at all, but I had everything that I needed. I always had a bag of weed and cigarettes. And taxi money, and we go out and eat. We just do whatever the fuck we wanted to, right? I felt like I had zero responsibilities and I could do whatever I wanted, and so that sort of progressed into my early 20s, and then it started to get to the point where I was doing drugs more often than not, and then in 96 I moved to Montreal with my brother. We drove across the country in his 2-seater TR6 Triumph convertible, and I spent about 7 or 8 months there and came back. And then a few of my friends were into selling coke pretty heavy then, and so I just started rolling with those guys. Those are guys I grew up with from high school and shit. And I ended up moving to Vancouver, and I got hooked up with these dudes that were heavily involved in sort of like racketeering and selling large amounts of coke. So I started bringing over large amounts of cocaine in the ferry to friends of mine in Victoria, and had a crew selling dope for me in Victoria, and they ended up getting busted with a bunch of it, and so I had to pay the debt. And I paid the debt to my old roommate, and he ended up spending the money not paying our guy. And I ran into him in Vancouver, and he was like, where the fuck's my... I jumped into my girlfriend's car at the time out front of this club on Richards. It was called the Palladium. And he said, where the fuck's my money? And I had actually all the receipts from the bank, me making the bank deposit to my roommate. And I'm like, I paid you your fucking money, and I gave him the bank receipts. And he was like, what the fuck? So he called my old roommate up, and he came down, and I should have known better. He was a bit of a psycho, big fucking dude, short, stocky, used to be a boxer.
Your roommate or the
my old roommate?
Okay.
My old roommate, the guy that spent the money. So basically I sent him the money. He didn't give it to Buddy. He spent it and didn't tell him. It was like, oh, Jay never paid his debt. And in hindsight, I mean, that was my fault. I should have kept in contact with my guy, but I didn't. And so we're all standing there, and I'd had a few lines of Coke and a couple Heineken. I felt a little cockier than I should have been. And I was getting a bit mouthy with him, and he was standing here, and I wasn't paying attention to him, and I should have been paying attention. And he fucking sucker punched me, hit me square in the nose, dropped me with one punch, and started jumping on my head, and probably jumped in my head probably 6 or 8 times, and then stopped. And then so I jumped up and was like, fuck, and then I wanted to fight. And the story that I was told, I don't remember how this went down, is as soon as I got up and was like, okay, come on, they were like, holy fuck, because you're not supposed to get up after you get stomped. And they ran away, and there was cops watching, because it was during there used to be a skate comp called Slam City Jam. It was a huge world competition in Vancouver. It was kind of like the X Games, but in Vancouver. It was, and so tons of people from all over the States and all over Europe were there competing at I forget where the thing was. That was a BC Place, I think, was one of them. Some of them were out of the P&E Forum. And so there's tons of people there, and there was lots of cops in the street. The street was packed with people. The club was the after party. And so he ran, and the cops were watching him stomp on my head, and he just basically didn't see the cops and ran right into them, and they basically grabbed him and bounced him off the ground. And so I remember 2 of my friends coming over, and they're like, holy fuck, Jay. They didn't realize it was me, because they could see it too. And they're like, take your shirt off, dude, you're bleeding. And so I was wearing this Jordan shirt that had the sleeveless, and it was like a baby blue color. I took it off and put it on my face. I was pouring blood. And all of a sudden this cop's like, hey, you, come here. And I like look, and this eye was already closed. Like it was swollen shut immediately. And they're like, hey, come here. And I walk over and I look on the ground and it's Buddy, hog-tied. He's got a huge gash in his head, bleeding, like bleeding hard. And they're like, do you know this guy? And I'm like, nope. They're like, Buddy, we just watched him stomp your face. And if you looked in a mirror, you're fucked up. And I'm like, I don't fucking know this guy. I'm like, fuck off. I'm going home. And the cop tried to grab me and I like pushed him. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, fuck off. I don't know who this guy is. I'm leaving. And I went home and, or I went back to my brother's place because I was still living in Victoria at the time. And going back and forth. At this point, I'd gone back to Victoria, but I was still sort of going back and forth.
Whatever happened with the guy that was owed the money to? He just kind of
he didn't know that was gonna happen. Like, so basically, we called Buddy on his shit. We're like, what the fuck? Why didn't you pay me the money that Jay gave you? And he like spazzed out and fucking hit me, and then just sort of like spazzed out because he was a spaz. Yeah. Fucking jumped on my head a bunch, and then didn't know what to do. I got up. I was like, come on, motherfucker! And he was like, holy fuck, and ran away. And the cops fucking turfed him on the ground. So apparently the cops drove him to North Vancouver and gave him a bunch of shots in the head and dropped him off in North Vancouver and didn't press charges because they couldn't. Because I was like, I don't know this guy, and made him walk home all beat up with a big cut in his head from getting hogtied. And the next day, my brother came home because I was staying at his apartment, and he made me go to St. Paul's Hospital. And it turns out I broke this cheekbone, broke my nose, broke my jaw, and fractured this cheekbone. Like fucked me up good. I spent a week in the hospital. Had to get my jaw wired. I got a plate put in my face, and so it basically incurred some more trauma. I went back to Victoria after that and started healing up and immediately hooked up with an old friend of mine and started selling dope, started selling coke, and started doing it a ton while my jaw was wired shut. And then we just started smoking tons of crack. And very much like alcohol and cocaine, I discovered if you smoke a ton of crack and then smoke some heroin, it's a great equalizer. You can go to sleep.
Right, and that's kind of...
Yeah.
You can go to sleep, you feel better, you don't feel so fucking wigged out from smoking crack for 2 days. And so that's what we started doing. We started doing crack and heroin. And for me, heroin made me feel like I was okay. And part of the story my story that I skipped is early on when I started doing drugs and drinking, it was the first time in my life I felt okay. And I felt a little bit safe. And the weird thing is like, even though drinking and doing drugs is dangerous, it created the illusion of safety for me. And I think the reason being is because it was something that for the first time in my life, I could control. And growing up in my home, I couldn't control what was going on. I never knew what my dad was going to do. I didn't know if the cops were coming. I didn't know if my mom was going to take me, my brother, and leave my dad, which she did so many times. You know, we're leaving, go to my grandparents. Like, you know, I would fucking beg to stay with my dad, even though, like, my mom's got a fat lip and a black eye. And I'm like, I don't want to leave, Dad. So drugs for me and alcohol was the first thing I think in my life that I could control. It was mine. I could ingest as much as I want. I could do whatever I want with it. And then when I started selling it, it was also mine. I could flush it down the toilet. I could smoke it all. I could snort it all. I could sell it to whoever I wanted. So it was the first thing that it was genuinely mine. I felt that I could control. It was just mine.
It sounds like initially it's taking care of you in some ways, in the sense of it's providing an income and it's letting you change the way you feel.
Made me I was cool, right? You know, the guy with dope is a cool guy, right? Everyone in the club liked me, right? I always had cocaine, and then I had a bar tab, so that was amazing, right? They're like, oh, it's a shit, and I was like, I have the shit, right? I was a DJ, I had a popular club night, so I finally felt like I'd arrived, and I was like, you know, this is what I was meant to be doing, and that sort of void was a bit filled. It was still there a little bit, but probably 90% less than it had ever been in my life, and so when I started doing heroin, I mean, that made it even better. And so that 10% that was still there was completely gone at that point. And I was like, holy fuck. And then funny thing about heroin too is the first couple times I did it, I got sick and didn't like it. Like I was like violently ill. Like it was fucking not fun at all. The next day I was like, that sucked. Like people were like, oh, did you like it? And I'm like, no. Like it was fucking awful. But it's a lot like weed. If you start doing it more, you get that tolerance. And then you're like, oh, I kind of do like this. And then you're like, oh, fuck, like, this is the shit, right? Because I was a chronic pot smoker, too, for, like, a long time. Like, I'd wake up and hit the bong. Like, that was, like, you know, before I even got out of bed sometimes, I'd be fucking, you know,
getting blazed,
either doing hot knives or hitting the bong, right? Like, in my underwear in the kitchen, fucking. And so what I didn't realize, even though I knew this, is that if you do heroin for a few days, you develop a dependency and you get fucking dope sick. And so basically once that happened, like I was pretty much fucked at that point. And that's like you asked when I knew I was fucked, it was then. So that was the end of the 90s. It was like 99, 2000. And that's when my addiction totally took hold, and that's when pretty much drugs took over. And I was still selling drugs at that time, but I was doing them every single day at that point. And I'd gotten to the point where I couldn't put it down. It was like the obsession was there, and I was done. And for me, drugs had that effect, and alcohol didn't. And I think even to this day, I'm 99% sure I can go for a beer right now and not drink the bar dry. But I know with 100% certainty that there's going to be that one time I'm going to have a couple of drinks, and that obsession for drugs might kick in again.
Yeah.
And I am never going to take that chance. So I admitted to myself, over 8 years ago, that I can never safely drink ever again. And I never liked drinking enough to go for a beer too. I was always like, why would you do that? Like, let's go get drunk. I like alcohol for the effect produced. I don't like it for the fucking taste. Right? So for me, I'm like, why the fuck would I go for a drink or two? Let's go have a coffee. Or like I would go out with my friends while they drank, and if I didn't want to drink, I wouldn't drink. They'd get drunk, but I would just have like a pop or whatever, or like a Virgin Caesar or some shit. So like,
yeah, you're not drinking beer for the taste.
So the weird thing was like I love the effect produced by alcohol, and it made me feel like I was okay, and also created that false sense of safety for me, and that sense of control that I'd always looked for as a kid.
Courage, as they call it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I was a little funnier, a little better looking in my mind, and a better pool player. Like all sorts of shit would happen when I drank, but I was always able to put alcohol down. Whereas drugs just fucking grabbed me and took me. Basically, like that's the best way I can describe it. At that point, like early 2000, at the end of the 90s, drugs grabbed me and it fucking took me away. It fucking robbed me of everything. And so yeah, basically for the next 10 years, I was immersed in my addiction and did all the things that I thought that I was immune to in my family history. And that's when my dad and I kind of hooked up too and started doing heroin together, and there was lots of times we sold dope together, and I think it was like 2006, 2005-ish. He got into a domestic argument and turned violent with his partner at the time and got 6 months in jail. And I ended up getting arrested on an unrelated charge and going into custody at Wilkinson Road, Victoria, while he was there. So we ended up getting bunked up together and spent about 35 days sharing a cell together at Wilkinson Road, so did time together. And the first person that ever offered me a needle was my dad's girlfriend, doing heroin with my dad.
Before that, you were just like smoking it?
Just smoking, yeah. I didn't end up taking the needle. She made me, they were shooting it, and I was smoking in this kitchen. We were drunk too. Another night where I wanted to puke my guts out and didn't enjoy it at all. But she offered me to use a needle, and I was like, oh fuck, what the fuck? Like, I don't fucking use needles. I only smoke it. Right? Like,
Yeah, that was the line.
That's harsh. Yeah.
That's the exact
that was the
same.
line, right?
Yeah.
But that's the exact same thing with crack and cocaine.
Yeah.
It's like there's this social stigma around, oh, you do crack. It's like, well, you're doing coke. Crack is just cocaine with a little bit of baking soda and fucking water. Like,
But it wasn't long after that, before I actually got assaulted by Buddy, that a friend of mine came over. He actually wasn't allowed at our house because my partner at the time, who I was selling dope with, didn't want him over because he was into shooting heroin and stuff. And I ran into him one night outside of our apartment. I was meeting somebody else, and I was drunk, and so I was like, my buddy wasn't home, and I was like, fuck, come over, man. I don't give a shit. And he had some heroin, and he was like, do you mind if I shoot some heroin? And I was like, well, you gotta give me some. Do you have clean needles? And he's like, yeah. And so he fucking shot me up with heroin, and again, I fucking puked my guts out for the rest of the night in the bathroom, and had zero fun. It was like, that was fucking ridiculous. But that was my first experience. And so what happened in that experience was seeing somebody that I've known for most of my life, we've been friends since we were about 13, shoot heroin in front of me for the first time. It kind of made it not as harsh, right? It desensitized me a little bit. Like, okay, my bro just shot heroin. That was intense. He shot me with heroin. That was intense, but now it's not as intense as it once was. So it kind of pushed me over that threshold and the point of fucking no return, right? And then, so I continued to throughout that period of time to do heroin, and I got to the point where when I started shooting it that I couldn't do it myself, because to this day I don't like needles. I go get blood work done, I literally look away and I'm like, fucking hurry.
Oh yeah, man, I cry.
Like, hate it.
I'm the worst.
So I used to phone my buddy up, my buddy Devin, who I'm still friends with today. I just played a show at the Queens with him. He filled in for our drummer who was away. So we've been friends forever. He's been off heroin for a long time. I would call him up and he would come over to my apartment downtown in Victoria. I was living in a bachelor and working at the Strathcona. And he would fix me up. So he'd doctor me and shoot me up full of heroin, and we'd smoke cigarettes and watch Law and Order in the morning, and that was like our fucking daily ritual. So come over, watch Law and Order, and do heroin. But I was fully wired, right? But I thought, that's what we do, right? And we just hang out, and then later that night I go to work and I'm fucking high on heroin, and it hadn't really hit me yet that I was fucking, shooting heroin every fucking day, right? Like in my mind,
But
still,
you're becoming,
I still had that fucking attitude that I was different, right? Like, despite, like I said, overwhelming fucking family history that told me with irrefutable evidence that I'm fucked if I behave in that way and ingest drugs in that manner. But I'm like, you know what? I'm still good. I still got this. And that delusional, addictive mind, right? Like our addict mind telling us it's not that bad and not remembering the bad parts, right? Like, oh, it's just still good. I'm still having fun, right? And not realizing that I can barely, pay rent at the end of the month because I've spent most of my fucking tips on fucking heroin. So just progressed from there, and throughout, from August of 2000, it's the first time I went to treatment. I got a robbery charge in February of 2000. I robbed a gas station when I was fucking high on Ativan, and heroin and cocaine. I've been doing drugs for stayed up for a couple of days and was walking home, and for some reason thought it'd be a good idea to rob the gas station, and I did, and I got arrested, and I got released on $5,000 bail. That was my first adult charge, my first charge ever. Never had any youth convictions. Got arrested a lot in high school, but always got let go for lack of evidence.
Were you just slap on the wrist for what? Like,
yeah, just never,
stealing or
never,
just kind of minor bullshit?
Never convicted. I actually, when I was, I think, 11, I got caught shoplifting, stealing G.I. Joes, and I went through the John Howard Society, their restorative justice program, which is ironic because I work for the John Howard Society now. And one of the people I teach the kids with every Tuesday and Thursday is one of the restorative justice workers. So I talked to the kids about that. I'm like, I went through the restorative justice program, and I didn't get a youth charge as a result. So I got a robbery charge. I got released on bail, and I ended up getting drunk with my mom one night. She posted my bail for me. She put up her condo, $5,000 surety bail, and she thought it'd be a good idea for us to get drunk together. And my mom knows what happens when I drink, and so she passed out, and I took her bank card and went and bought drugs and stayed up for a day and a half. And when I went home, my key wouldn't work in the lock. Big surprise, and she had revoked my bail because she was fucking mad that I stole her bank card and spent like $300 of her money.
Understandably, yeah.
Right, and I was like, oh, what a bitch. And like totally thought she was a fucking bitch for doing that. Like looking back, it was a fucking harsh dick move. I was like, oh, she bought the fucking vodka. What the fuck?
Like, you know what happened.
That was my attitude, right? I'm like, what a fucking cunt. And so I was on the run for about I think like 3 months, and I got picked up on a warrant. But I still had my bail available. Like, it wasn't like I lost my bail. She had just pulled it. And so my uncle, who had done a life sentence for murder, he'd been out for a long time, and he said, I'll post your bail for you if you get a date for treatment. And he goes, there's a place called Maple Ridge Treatment Center. I've sent a lot of guys. He was running a program that still runs to this day called LINK, and it stands for long-term inmates now in the community. So he helps guys that have done long prison sentences reintegrate into society, helps them get into halfway houses, sometimes lets them stay at his house. And he's won tons of community awards, and he's been in Maclean's magazine, and like he's like, wow, really turned his life around. So he's like, I'll post your bail, go to treatment. So I did. I got a date for treatment, and I went to Maple Ridge Treatment Center, and it was a 12-step program, and the requirement for the program was to finish the first 5 steps, and then it's encouraged that you continue on with your step work when you leave. And it's a 28-day program. And I remember I did my 5th step with a guy named Bob Sutton. And the 5th step is you admit to yourself and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs, or to God. And so basically you just talk about all the bad shit you've done. And he was like, Sutton Realty. He's like, he's old, he looked like an old hot rodder guy. He had slicked hair. He had a red satin jacket on. He was wearing a watch that fucking was like gold watch. It looked like it was fucking like it weighed 100 pounds. The guy was like a baller, right? And so he rolls in. He's like this old 90-year-old dude, been sober probably 60 years. I was like, holy fuck, this guy's intense. Super nice. And so we sat down, did my step 5, and at the end, he's like, so you're never going to drink or drug again. I'm like, well, no, I'm going to smoke weed when I finish here, obviously, right? And he's like, I'm like, what the fuck? And he's like, no. And he fucking moved his chair in front of the door and sat down so like I couldn't get out of the door. And I'm thinking I could pick this dude up in the chair and move him.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, what are you doing, dude? And so he's like, oh, we're not going anywhere until you admit you're never drugging again. And so so I'm like, holy fuck, dude. So we went back and forth for like probably 40 minutes, and I'm trying to justify the reasons why I'm going to smoke weed and why weed's okay. And finally I realized this dude's not moving, and I'm not actually going to pick him up and move him. So I'm like, fine, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm never smoking weed again either. And he's like,
just tell him
okay.
what he wants to hear, yeah.
Right? And so he shakes my hand and he goes, okay, we're done. And so I completed the program, got my certificate, and my brother came to the graduation, and, you know, teary and fucking... I played that song. We all had to choose a song, so I played the Verve Bittersweet Symphony, right? And it was like my fucking clean and sober, and I lasted like 2 weeks. And because I got out and started smoking weed immediately again, and then I'm like, well, I can probably drink because alcohol was never a problem. And the next thing you know, I'm fucking smoking crack again. And then I went to treatment again in 2004. Went back to the same treatment center, and at that point, it had changed from a 12-step program to the wellness wheel, whatever the fuck that means, and it was just sort of like a not harm reduction at that point, because harm reduction was still a new sort of catchphrase, but it was along those lines, just like, you know, teaching you life skills, and they still encourage you to go to 12-step meetings, but it wasn't.
They're not forcing you to.
Didn't have to do step work as a part of the curriculum, and so I completed that, and then I went back again to the same treatment center in 2007. So I went to Maple Ridge Treatment Center 3 times.
So even the wellness wheel stuff, it was just like, how long do you successfully complete it the second time?
Yeah, every time. The second time I there was a group of guys there, and we all drove into town and went and bought heroin. So I did heroin for the first 3 or 4 days I was there, and then I was like, why the fuck am I here doing heroin? So I cut that out, and I stayed sober for the rest of the program and finished. But I was really more concerned with going to the gym and eating a lot and getting bigger. I didn't really... What I wanted to do is I wanted the treatment center to teach me how to moderate, because I was like, there's got to be something that I forgot along the way. There's an answer they can teach me, and because I still wanted to do drugs like recreationally, I just didn't want to have the fucked up consequences, right?
Right.
Like, drugs are fucking my life up and getting me all these criminal charges, so they must know the key to me being able to moderate like I used to. Because like we talked about, I remember the good old days, right? But all the fucked up things, I'm like, I want to stop doing that.
Right. Even though, no matter if they're doing 12-step, whether they're doing 12-step, whether they're doing CBT, whether they're doing a wellness wheel, whatever, they've never at any point said, we're going to teach you how to use drugs and alcohol responsibly.
The opposite.
But you just have this in your head.
Yeah, they're like, you need to get rid of your reservations or you're going to get loaded again. And I was like, fuck, whatever, right? Still have that fucking, I'm different. And so the third time I finished the program, third time I smoked crack. One day when I was coming back from the gym, I went by the ghetto, which you had to walk by. It was like this complex, and I knew there was dope there, so I went and bought dope and got high. And I came back and didn't go for dinner, and everybody knew that I was going to the gym all the time, and if I skipped dinner, something was up. And so the next day they called me in the office. So that night they called me in the office and like, you can pee in a cup, and I peed and I tested positive for cocaine. And I'm like, oh man, there was some guy smoking rock in the corner. I must have walked.
Yeah, you just kind of caught contact on it.
Right, the counselor's like, he's like, are you kidding me? And he's like, that's what you're going with. I'm like, oh, for sure, man. There's no way I smoke crack.
Those are the best excuses.
Right?
The fucking
And so he's like, sleep on it.
dirty
And
piss excuse.
he goes, sleep on it and come back in the morning and we'll talk about it. So in the morning I came back. I'm like, okay, fuck, I was getting high. And he goes, well, I know. Right? So they made me sign a recommitment form. Because at that point it was a harm reduction based treatment center, right? They weren't big on shame or tough love. They wanted people to stay and let you know it's okay to relapse as part of people's story. And despite that not really being helpful to me at the time, it did plant that seed of compassion, I think. And because they treated me like a human being, and they didn't make me feel like a piece of shit for struggling that day. And so I finished that program too, and left and lasted I think I lasted a weekend. And was getting high that next weekend, hanging out with the wrong people, and then in 2010 I was in custody again, and looking at probably like a 2.5 year sentence for a group of charges, like some possession charges, and I smashed a hydroponic store window out and fucking stole a bunch of Volcano vaporizers out of it, and with my cousin actually. He was in his cab waiting around the corner. I won't say who his name is because we're recording it, but and so I was in custody, and so I signed up for a treatment center in Prince George called Baldy Hughes. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's way the fuck on an old Air Force base in Prince George, like 45 minutes out of town, and they want you to give a 6 month to a year commitment. and so it's like long term. It's based on can't remember the name of the place. It's like a farm in Italy where it's like a self-sustaining treatment center where people work and like grow vegetables and like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it's based on that model, and a guy named Lauren Maincourt, who was a federal MLA at one point, was the guy that funded that initially and started doing it. And he had gone to Italy to this treatment center there and saw that place and stayed there for a bit and was like, this is amazing. So his idea was to do it in BC. And so I went there. The Crown Council agreed to release me on bail to go there, and part of my conditions were to complete the group therapy part of it. And so I stayed there for 4.5 months and completed the group therapy. And at the end of that, it was almost Christmas time, and the last component was like work therapy. So they would teach you life skills and how to build resumes and go back to work. And I didn't need any of that. I just needed to learn how to cope with my inability to deal with my trauma and life. And so I felt pretty confident because I'd done a lot of work in group. And our counselor, she was 18 years sober in AA. She had a master's degree as a therapist. So she was one of those people I identified with. I'm like, you know what I'm feeling because you've been through it. She wasn't a heroin addict, but she, severe alcoholic at one point, and she had a clinical background. So I'm like, you know what you're talking about, and you have some life experience. So I paid attention to the shit she said. She was a hard nose. They called her the Hammer. And for a reason, because she fucking was hardline, right? She'd call us on our shit, and I fucking appreciated it. So I got back to Victoria, and I moved in with my cousin, and he was still driving. He was driving taxi still, and so he would take me to meetings, and drive me to AA meetings, and then he'd pick me up afterwards and drive me home, and didn't charge me, but every fucking night he drove me to an AA meeting that he was working. He's fucking amazing, and I got a sponsor, so I ended up picking a sponsor that I probably knew I could get away with some shit. He was on methadone, and he was like one of those guys like, oh yeah, there's some good looking girls here tonight, eh? Like that dude, like just kind of being douchey, right? And so I knew that I could kind of continue to just go to the gym. I wasn't working. I just would hang out at home, and we had turntables set up, and so we'd play music and I'd fucking DJ and just sort of fucking did nothing. And eventually my mom, our rent was really cheap because ironically the guy that owned the house was my cousin's mom's brother, and years before, like 10 years before, he was living there and was in the midst of his addiction, and his dealer came over to collect some money, and he got all paranoid and shot and killed his dealer in the living room, and you could actually see the old bullet holes in the wall that had been plastered over. So he was doing a 10-year manslaughter bit, and so his house he still owned his house, and it was for rent, so we got really cheap rent because we were fucking family. And so my mom was gonna lend me $1,000. I asked my mom to lend me $1,000 so I can pay rent for a couple months in advance, and then I wanted to go back to work because I was kind of tired of just going to the gym every day. And she was like, yeah, no problem. And that was the first time my mom had just handed me that kind of money, and I was like, holy fuck, it was like a big deal to me, right? And I felt really great, and I was like, wow, them trust me again. And I was walking through Tillicum Mall, and we lived across the street, and she dropped me off, and I ran into one of the guys I used to buy dope from, and he gave me a big hug, and I think I did some time with him too. And he's like, you look good, bro. And he's like, fucking, you got your shit together. I'm like, yeah, because I was fucking pretty big at that time compared to what I used to look like. And he's like, you know what, man, I'm still selling dope. If you know anybody that needs dope, how about you give them my number if they're solid, and I'll piece you off with cash instead of dope. Are you down for that? And I'm thinking in my head, don't fucking do it. And I'm like, yeah, for sure, man. Give me your number. So he gave me his number, and I put it in my cell phone, and I went back to the place, and my cousin was at work, working a taxi shift, and I remember spreading the money out on the bed and put my cell phone down, and I just sat there, and like that obsession was just fucking grinding away at me, and I was like, fuck. And for about 45 minutes I fought it, and I was like, fuck, and finally I was like, fuck, like bring me some dope. And this guy came and met me and brought me some shit, and I got high. And so after that I went on like a 3.5 month run. That was in, when was it? That was in February of 2010. So I went to the treatment center, and it must have been August, so November, December, January, February, March, April, May. No, when was it? It must have been June. I stayed sober 7.5 months, and then I went out in February. And my cousin, it was funny, my cousin came home that night, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, hanging out. I'm like, do you want to drink tonight? And he's like, no, we're not fucking drinking tonight. I'm like, listen, I'm going to get a tattoo, one of the tattoos I have here, and I'm like, I will buy you a tattoo if you drink with me tonight. And he said, no fucking way. And he goes, you'll buy me a tattoo? He goes, all right. He goes, okay, we'll drink tonight, but fucking tomorrow I'm taking you to a fucking meeting. He goes, I'm not going down this road with you. But he goes, yeah, man, let's go get tattooed. So we went and bought some Palm Bays and we're drinking. And I'm like, well, so I got some crack in my room too. And he's like, holy fuck. He's like, what the fuck?
What are you doing?
It's a tomorrow meeting, bro. He's like, this is fucking ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, I promise. Then so we go to my tattoo buddy's house, this guy Shane, and clearly he's on heroin, right? I see him and I'm like, you got dope, eh? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, so my cousin went in the bathroom, like, sell me some. So he sold me some heroin. So within an hour and a half, I'm drinking high on crack and I'm already doing heroin. It was that quick. And so I stayed out for another 3.5 months and just went hard, like all day, every day, like picked up right where I left off. And like fucking like all day, every day. I'd stay up for like 7-8 days at a time. I think like 7.5 days was like the longest I ever stayed up, but like, you know, no sleep, like three days average, like, so I was sleeping for like, you know, intermittently throughout the week, and ended up racking up some more charges, and on my birthday of that year, that was May, my birthday's May 17th, I decided I want to go back to treatment, so I phoned a treatment center that day in Vancouver, Together We Can, and got a date for treatment, and on June 2nd, I went into, I was supposed to go to Vancouver that morning, so my mom drove me to the ferry, and then I got on the ferry, and I was supposed to get off, get the PCL bus on the ferry, and then get off at the PCL station at Main and Terminal in Vancouver, call a cab, and go do my intake at Together We Can. And we stopped at the Max in Victoria to get a phone card. She's like, you're going to need a phone card, because I'm going to want you to call me. I didn't have a cell phone. And so we stopped, and one of my guys was outside of Max, so she went in to buy me the phone card. I'm like, come here. And so I bought some crack, and I was smoking it on the ferry. And then when I got off at the PCL station, I was like, fuck, okay, I'm going to go down to Hastings, and I'll buy like just $20 worth of heroin, and that'll be it. I'll be done. Then I'll go to Together We Can, right? I need something to come down, and we'll, you know what happened, right? Fucking 4 a.m. rolls around. I spent all my money, and I missed my intake date for treatment. So it's now 4 a.m. June 3rd. And so in the morning, I went to call Together We Can. I'm like, is Stacy there? Stacy Wilson, the director. And he's like, yeah, hold on. So I'm like, hey, it's Jay Flett. And the woman that had referred me her name was Charlene Law, and she was an outreach worker for an organization called Umbrella in Victoria. She's fucking great. She really was instrumental in getting me bail to go to Baldy Hughes. And she also helped me get into Together We Can, and she knew Stacy Wilson, and she was a personal friend of his, so they got me in quicker than normal. And so he's like, what's up, Jay? He's like, you missed your date. He's like, fuck, what the fuck happened? And I go, oh man, I got off the PCL, I was hungry, so I ran over to Subway, and I was outside smoking after I ate my sub, and I ran into this dude that I knew from rolling around the streets of Vancouver, and he had a couple of bags of them, and we're outside smoking, and the cops rolled up on their mountain bikes, and they knew him. So they ran both of our names. We're hanging out, and all the shit he had was stolen. They arrested us all with possession of stolen property. And they just released me this morning because they realized that it wasn't my stuff. And I guess Buddy told them that it wasn't. And so he's quiet on the phone for a few minutes. And I'm like, hello? He goes, you realize that I'm in a recovery, eh? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I've heard that story so many fucking times. I was like, fuck. And he goes, I'll tell you what. And he goes, fuck. He goes, okay. He goes, because Charlene's a friend of mine, if you can be here in a cab in the next 20 minutes, we can have a conversation in person, but I'm not promising anything. He's like, hurry the fuck up, and he hangs up. So I call a cab and I go there. And so I get there and I'm waiting out in the lobby for so long, and finally he calls me into his office, and it's him and the house manager, this guy named Jody. And Jody's like this hip hop guy. He drove like a Chrysler 300 and shaved head, and he actually quit working at Together We Can to pursue his hip hop career. Like, he's that guy, right? But super good guy. So he's sitting there, and Stacy's like, okay, tell Jody the story. So I told him what I just told you. And so Jody, same thing, is quiet for so long after I tell the story. And he's just nodding his head. I'm like waiting for the verdict, and he goes, it's a good story, bro. He goes, you know, man, he goes, you just like sat around for like an hour this morning, and you made that story up. And he goes, it's a good story. He goes, you just came up with that. He goes, you got the details worked out, and he called us. Here you are telling us a good story. He goes, we all know that story, man. We've all told that story. He goes, that story is fucking bullshit, bro. He goes, but I'll tell you what. He goes, that is some good fucking bullshit. And he goes, the way you told it was fucking great. He goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, if you fuck up one time, there's no reason we're going to give you. You're out of here. He goes, but that's such a good story. We're going to let you stay. He goes, welcome to Together We Can. He shook my hand and he let me stay. So that was June 3rd, and that's the day that I got sober.
Nice.
Yeah, so I stayed, finished that program, spent 72 days there, and then went through their second stage house for 2 months after that.
And you've been clean and sober ever since?
Ever since, yeah. So that was June 3rd, 2011. Yeah.
So, I mean, I noticed, like, what was interesting was some parallels there with Janul's story, just in the sense of, like, I remember him talking about, like, yeah, like, it wasn't like, you know, I had dreamed of doing heroin. I remember getting sick, the first couple of times I did it, but just using it to come down off of coke.
Yeah.
Off of a big run, off of being up for, you know, at night and psychosis, just being, you know, not sleeping and all that kind of shit and just needing something to come down. And I remember him saying, like, he didn't realize, like, when you do it for a few days in a row, then you become physically dependent on it and you don't feel right until you do it again and stuff like that. And I remember that you guys had some adventures together, obviously not picnicking in Stanley Park kind of thing.
No, we basically just went and stole shit in Vancouver and just rolled around stealing stuff and made really fucking good money doing it. And I just got high on heroin and crack all day. Just would roll around and we'd wake up in the morning and go steal a new outfit and had like fresh clothes and just cruise around Vancouver jacking shit and then would sell it. And we had people that we'd fence it to and just do dope all day.
But I was just gonna say that with Janola, it was like I think he said, like, for him it was, you know, just a certain point where he was in jail where he's just like, I don't want to be one of these guys going in and out of jail. Like, I don't want to be a fucking loser anymore. What was the turning point? Yeah, I was just gonna say, because obviously it wasn't just being because you had been in treatment like a few times. What was it, 4 times before
5
that?
times total.
5 times total. So, like, what was the difference? I mean, like, some people would argue, was it the way that the treatment center did it, or was it your own? It had to be your own personal turning point.
The fucked up thing is that the drugs stopped working for me a long time ago. So the fun shit was like long over, and my drugs were my solution to not deal with life, right? And so what had happened like a long time before I actually sobered up was the effect that drugs gave me, so I didn't have to cope with shit. I always felt like shit. So those feelings were always there. And the more I could do as much drugs as I was able to do, and the feelings of like that void and that fucking not fitting in, that anxiety was fucking nonstop. And so the turning point for me was when I missed my intake date. I wound up at before I called Together We Can in the morning and told them my funny story. I wound up at Tim Hortons on Seymour, and I had exactly enough, exactly to the fucking penny for a small coffee. That was the exact change I had, and I had like half a pack of smokes left. And I bought a small coffee, and I sat down in that Tim Hortons. It was like 4 a.m. And I remember looking around, and I said it out loud. I said, I don't want to fucking live like this anymore. And, you know, in 12-step literature, they talk about the spiritual awakening or the psychic change. You know, it was like I could almost touch it. I could feel it. It was almost like a light went off. Like I literally as soon as I said those words out loud, I literally felt different. Like something, I could feel a fucking shift. And that was like the moment. And since that moment, I've never once even remotely felt close to doing drugs ever again. I've never considered it, never fucking, like, it's just the obsession to do drugs was gone in that moment. It's never come back.
So it was kind of like, I mean, a lot of people talk about like rock bottom, and people envision like, having to whatever, eat and take roll up cigarette butts on Hastings or something. Like, it can be it was almost like for a lot of people it's an emotional bottom. You're just like, I can't fucking, like, I can't keep feeling like this. I can't keep fucking living
I hit rock bottom a million times. I mean, the first time that I got locked up was rock bottom. I was talking about it today with somebody, like that feeling of, because my cousin, who I've talked about a bunch throughout this, he's actually dying of throat cancer right now. Today he just signed his like last will and testament with the hospital, so he's actually passing away. And the sad thing is, my uncle, I talked about too, is in hospice right now. His son, his dad, so they're both actually dying of cancer right now. The two people that were the most instrumental in my sobriety probably are in the midst of dying. But what was my point of saying that?
Just with hitting rock bottom, I think.
Oh, so the first time, yeah. So I was comparing the first time I got locked up. The first night I remember lockdown was at 10 o'clock at Wilkinson Road. So they locked the door until the morning, until they let you out at like 6:45 or whatever the fuck it is. And I remember the first time that door shut, and I looked around and I realized my power to choose had been taken away. I was not able to talk my way out of that fucking one. I was staying in jail until those motherfuckers let me out. I had my power to choose was gone, and that was a fucked up feeling. I was like, I really fucking fucked up this time, and I remember the sinking feeling of going, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm here till they say that I can go home.
That kind of power of that was kind of like the first experience of like powerlessness.
That's a rock bottom. I mean, holy fuck, my freedom is gone. And I was comparing that today to I was talking to a friend of mine about how my cousin. The only thing I can imagine my cousin being told he's terminal is like in that power to choose. Like you can't talk yourself out of that. When you get a terminal cancer diagnosis, you're going to die. Like, you can't manipulate yourself out of that diagnosis. Like you're fucking, that's it, it's absolute. At least with me, when I was in jail, I knew one day I was fucking getting out. You know what I mean? For my cousin, like that's it for him. Like he's fucking done. And the doctor's like, well, there's nothing we can do for you to keep you comfortable. My only way that I can relate to him getting those words told to him is this the night that I realized I wasn't getting out of jail until they fucking let me out. So for me, that was a big rock bottom. I mean, that was fucking, that sucked, but I mean, that wasn't enough.
Wasn't enough to make.
And I did that. I mean, I think I have like just under or around 50 convictions. I mean, I probably wasn't. I'd spent about a year and a half total in jail, but I mean, I've probably been arrested fucking 100 times at least, you know. But none of those things were enough. All of those things were a form of my rock bottom. You know, stealing from my mother and letting my friends down and rolling around doing greasy fucking shit to get dope. I mean, those are all rock bottoms, but none of them were enough. You know, breaking my brother's heart, my mother's heart, and you know, doing time with my dad, and all those fucked up things. None of them were enough. It just, for some reason, that one time, I finally had enough.
Just being at Tim Hortons at 4 a.m.
I was like, fuck this, I'm done. I don't want to fucking live like this anymore. And it was like, switch.
So I feel like that has got to be what's most instrumental in somebody being able to, and that's what made the rehab the 5th time take, is that now you're willing to actually give recovery a shot, where it's not about, well, what method they used or anything like that.
I just became teachable, I think, in that moment. And I finally got rid of the fucking stupid idea that I was different than everybody else. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not so different. And so people that have been sober a long time, I'm like, okay, what did you do? And they told me what they did, and I just did that. And then it got really simple, right? And so they tell you that, right? Just do what other people did, and then it's pretty simple.
Do things that are suggested to you, and whatever they might be, right? And just trying things that are therapeutic, that are going to help you in your recovery, deal with whatever it is, your trauma.
Totally. And I'm pretty lucky too, because I'm able to, my perspective on life is pretty good, and my girlfriend her and I share the same life views. I think we sort of can sift through trauma better than a lot of people, and we realize that, like, you know, fucked up things happen in life sometimes, and it's up to us how we if we hold on to it or not, and how we walk through it, right? And a lot of people that I know don't have that ability, and it's heartbreaking for me to see some people that aren't able to work through that shit, and they carry around that stuff with them for, you know, resentments and stuff for a long time. And I mean, I only went through one set of steps the first year being in AA, but I mean, fuck, my sponsor was an amazing human being. He ended up dying after my 1 year cake. He got a car accident and died, which was super shitty, but we went through the set of steps super thoroughly, and what he taught me is how to live that way on a daily basis, right? And do my like 10, 11, 12 on a regular basis. And he was like, if you live that way, you're not going to have to keep doing the steps every 6 months, because you're going to keep living that shit every day. So I do that shit, right? If I'm a fucking dick to somebody, you know, I make amends to them. And sometimes I've made amends to people that don't even fucking deserve it. Right.
I definitely,
just because I thought it was taught us the right thing to do, and like, you know, some people are fucking greasy and deserve to be told to fuck off, in my opinion. And, you know what I mean? But I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
I definitely, can
right?
can relate to the experience of like carrying something around and then making amends to that person, and then being like, you know what, they did have it coming a little bit, but just being like, well, at least you're clearing your side of the street.
And that's what I was taught to do, right? And so I sleep good at night, and you know, and sometimes I kind of go above and beyond, or you know, take the high road. We talk about that sometimes, you know, what that's like. It's fucking a bitter pill to swallow, but sometimes it's the right thing to do, you know. And at the end of the day, I mean, all I've got is my fucking life to live, and you know, my actions are the only thing I can control. That was a tough one for me to get my head around too. Not manipulating other people into doing what I want them to do.
Yeah.
I still fucking do it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, some of those old habits, the fucking, like,
she calls it Jedi.
She's
like,
your
the
girlfriend's
Jedi
over here
mind.
just laughing. Yeah,
it's like she. What did she say when we first got together? She was like, sometimes she goes, you can have a conversation with somebody, and they have like a it should be like they see things in a different way. By the end of the conversation, they see things the way you see it, but they actually think it was their own conclusion. And she's like, and you fucking somehow planted that seed.
That's.
I'm like, it's like fucking
shit.
Jedi mind tricks, right? And I don't fucking mean to do it, but it's just learned behaviors, right? And that's kind of a dick move too. And I don't do it to necessarily benefit myself, but I might actually do it sometimes to sort of win the argument or be right, you know. And at the end of it, I walk away going, yeah, I was right, and like, you know. So that stuff I still probably need to work on a little bit, but
yeah. In terms of the obsession to use, like I totally get what you're saying, like where you just kind of like lost it even before you even, you know, got to the point that you're sober, or like actually getting to that point. But I was just wondering, like, because you said something that was pretty nuanced, and like I've said similar things and kind of got shit on in like the rooms about feeling like you could drink at any time and like be fine for a while. You know what I mean? How long did it take for you in recovery to like kind of come to that conclusion, or like was there like ever like a like I could drink any time without like the caveat at the end of like but it will lead to drugs?
what do you like? I mean, I am very. I will never get to a point where I don't think that it's safe to do so. So I've always had it in my head like there'll be the one time that I get drunk enough that I'll think maybe doing drugs is a good idea, right? Okay. But I mean, the first year and a half of my recovery, I went to like 7 meetings a week, on average. I didn't hang out with anybody that wasn't in recovery. I only hung out with people in recovery. And about a year and a half in, I started a punk band with a guy that was about 10 years sober, member of my home group. And then I started to slowly incorporate people back into my life that maybe recreationally drank or like smoked weed. I even had friends that snorted coke occasionally. You know, I didn't hang out with them when they were doing that stuff, but there were people that were doing the next right thing that weren't shitty people, but they just had the ability to moderate certain things they did in their lives. I was very careful about what situations I put myself in, and not because I was afraid that I would engage in what they were doing, but I just was like, it's probably not a good idea, so I didn't do it. And then slowly but surely, as I developed in my recovery and kept doing the work on myself, you know, the majority of the people I hang out with now aren't in recovery, but you know, you wouldn't know it because they're fucking good people, and they live along the same principles that I was taught in recovery that keep me strong in my foundation and keep me where I need to be. Those are the only kind of people I hang out with, right? I mean, but we have alcohol in our home. My girlfriend drinks occasionally, and the only time I've ever seen her drunk is when she actually tells me she's drunk. She's like, "Oh, I'm pretty drunk," and I'm like, "You are?" Right? Like I can't even tell, right? I mean, you know,
but probably by your standard of like you're like, well, when I was drunk,
right? Well, she can handle her alcohol, right? But I mean, you know, some of my friends drink in my band, and I mean, I've probably played over 100 shows and all across Canada. We've done shows in Mexico and stuff, and you know, people never offer me alcohol when I'm playing. I don't know if I have a sign in my fucking head, like, you know, because the opposite was true years ago. I mean, people used to try to buy me shots nonstop. It's happened maybe twice in over 100 shows that I played. But I mean, for me, I'm different than other people in that sense that I have a strong foundation, and you know, I don't ever encourage people to if they don't feel safe in being around people like that or having alcohol in their home. I don't encourage other people to do what I do, but it's worked for me, and you know, and that's just what I do. And for me, I wouldn't have it any other way. I didn't get sober to live in a bubble, so I really fucking take the work seriously, and I still talk to my sponsor every week, you know, and he's become more of my friend. We just shoot the shit about life and talk about relationships or how work's going, and you know, we don't talk about the big book and 12-step stuff. He still refers to it as it pertains to, you know, if I'm struggling with something at work, or if I've ever had stuff come up where I'm like, you know, asking about how I can be a better partner to my girlfriend, you know, like, okay, I'm fucking, today I said some dumb shit. How can I not say dumb shit like that again? He'll give me some decent advice, and sometimes he'll refer to the book and, you know, where some of those feelings are coming from based on my own insecurities or whatever the fuck. But because I have that strong foundation, I'm able to live, and I can't quote directly, but they talk about it in 12-step literature, going anywhere a free man.
Yeah.
Right? And I always wanted that. That's what I wanted. And there was lots of dudes, men and women, that I knew that had the kind of recovery I wanted, and they lived in this free world, and they were able to go anywhere with immunity to that shit, right? They didn't have the obsession to drink or do drugs anymore. And I'm like, fuck, that's what I want.
Yeah, I think that's a more powerful form of recovery is not using and abusing drugs because you want to live a better way of life. It's not like, oh, I'm just sober or clean from drug use because it's not in my immediate vicinity. That's just like you said, like if your recovery is based on a bubble, that's actually a very dangerous place because anything you might find yourself put in a situation where that can be jeopardized.
Well, that's what I say to people that like bitch about like a crazy NA meeting where there's like the dog and the fucking baby crying and the people are moving around. I don't want to go there anymore. Like I'm like, if you only are gonna find peace and serenity in a place that's peaceful and serene, like there's a shitload of places in this world that you're never gonna be able to go. Yeah. Like so, like if that place is too much for you with a bunch of people that are clean, like you can't go anywhere in the fucking.
The way I look at the baby crying or the kid running around the meeting drives me fucking crazy too. But it's a test, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the kid's there to test me to fucking be like, well, you know, like calm down, dude. It's just a kid being a kid. Yeah. Like you know what I mean? Like I've been that guy before. I'm like, a fucking kid is fucking shouldn't be at this meeting, and then I'm like, okay, calm down. Right? That mom that brought their kid there probably doesn't have childcare, and she fucking needs to be at this meeting. You know what? And she may not be great at keeping her kid reeled in. That's none of my fucking business, right?
And yeah, that's just it. It's showing you where you're at spiritually, or where you're at in your recovery, where your work's at. Because that's what I notice for myself. When I'm not doing well and I'm not dealing with my shit, everybody else's shit's bothering me.
Totally.
But if I'm doing well and I'm making personal growth and I'm handling stuff and my relationships are good, somebody's kid or somebody's stupid share or whatever, it doesn't have to, I don't have to take it personal. It doesn't have to irritate me.
There was a woman that I met early on, like in the first couple of weeks of getting sober. She's a AA member. Her name's Donna Tack, and she wouldn't mind if I said her name because she likes people that know who she is. And she's a great, strong woman, and I remember her sharing early on, and this stuck with me to this day. She said, I was at a meeting one time, this guy was going on and on about whatever, and she was just like, oh man, this has nothing to do with the book, and she's like, just shut up, and she was just like judging him the whole time, and she turned to her right and looked, and there was a man sitting beside her, and he was weeping, and that guy's message made that guy cry, and she goes, that message wasn't for me that day, it was for fucking him, and I need to shut the fuck up and listen. And I was like, wow, that's fucking powerful, right? Like, and that stuck with me, right? So then I've caught myself in meetings before, especially early on, when certain people be talking about certain things. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? But it doesn't have to do with me in that moment. It might not. Right?
It's not supposed to be homogenized. I think that's what's interesting. People feel like maybe their experience wasn't, bad enough or whatever. But, everyone's experience can reach the right person where someone else's experience can.
Totally.
I think that's a big part of it. But to that fact, that was what I gotta ask you. This person, the Hammer or whatever, that kind of reached you, and you were saying because she was trained in that she had a master's or something of counseling.
She was almost had her master's degree. I think she was in school at the same time, but she was like in that last year of her master's degree to be a therapist.
But she had also been clean and sober through a 12-step program for a long time. Yeah. So, and you felt that the fact that she knew what she was talking about and had been through the shit, that was starting to reach you more. I mean,
I think she just seemed a bit more credible to me, especially on the therapeutic end of it, right? Because she's talking about things that will be helpful for me to cope with life and strategies I can implement into my life to deal with stress and to cope with life on life's terms that weren't 12-step related. That resonated with me. But other counselors that were like, I've been in AA for 15 years, but I've never been to fucking school a day in my life. But here's some clinical advice. I'm like, okay, like you're probably reading from a textbook that a clinician wrote, but like I took it under advisement, right? I'm like, See, I trust this guy because he's fucking still sober, but does he fucking know what he's talking about? Like, it's dangerous when people that aren't clinicians start coming off like clinicians. I've seen sponsors do it before too.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting area to talk about. Is like, we were talking about, I was talking about the unbroken brain and some of the assertions that the author was making, and that was kind of one of them. Is that she'll cite studies were saying, well, it actually doesn't matter if the person has the same lived experience as their patient or whatever, but like you're saying, it kind of becomes like almost a placebo effect of like, if the patient feels that the person's credible and that motivates them to be more open-minded or more willing to accept what the person's talking to them, then it becomes more effective in some ways, it seems like. Whether or not the...
yes and no. I think that it really is, if you're talking about recovery specifically, I think at the end of the day, it's all about connection, right? If you connect with somebody, I don't really give a shit if you've got 50 years of education or 10 years lived experience. If you connect with that person and their message has an impact in your life, that's really what it's all about. And I think that we start to pick apart fucking people's credentials too much. I think we can miss the message.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's what I was gonna say too. Like when you were talking about that man sharing the rooms where the woman that told you the story was just like, what the fuck, and then Buddy's crying was like, I figured that out like maybe a year and a half into recovery too. Like where like I would do these shares that were just like, and I'm guessing you'll get this as like musician and DJ and stuff, like where I was just kind of playing to the room and I was just placating what everyone wants to hear and shit. And then like
yeah, we've all done that.
Yeah, then like the few times like where I was like just kind of like you know what, this is how I actually feel, this is my truth, I'm gonna share it.
Yeah.
And like I'm thinking like, oh man, that fucking bombed, or like I rambled on or whatever, and then someone comes up and they're like, yeah, man, that was fucking awesome. 100%. Like thank you so much, like no one ever says that or whatever. Yeah. Even if 10 people are shaking their head like, oh, what the fuck is this guy on about? Like, totally. Yeah, it is about that connection, right? And I think that's 100%. The beauty of not only 12-step rooms, but when you go to treatment as well. Like, there's gonna be a bunch of different counselors, a bunch of different people in recovery that all have different personalities and all different types of ways of dealing with each other. And someone's gonna be connected to you, right? Totally. Like if they're all just fucking clinical robots, it's only gonna work for people that can connect with clinical robots, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It's just coming to this kind of thing of you definitely don't want people who are not trained and professional giving the advice on behalf of I don't want somebody who has no medical training giving me medical advice. Right. I get that. But at the same time, it's weird where it's there's all of these different ways. There's, the one end of the spectrum's compassion, one of the end of the spectrum's the tough love. There's one where it's more ideology, maybe on the 12-step spectrum. There's more CBT. There's going to be people saying, okay, well, you should be just giving people objective advice, and more it's no, you want to try and just build a relation. It's almost like you're trying to make a connection with somebody. Everybody's so different, and at any given point it's kind of like a hit and miss game or something where you're just trying to make that connection. Maybe the person doesn't even know at the time what's going to reach them or something like that you're just kind of it's just a numbers game of totally. Just trying to.
And what I'm finding now too is there's lots of organizations now that are looking for lived experience over education. Even I work in housing, and everyone I work with on my team, almost everybody that works in the organization has a degree, either social work or criminology or something. And I've been a part of conversations where somebody that doesn't work for the organization will ask one of my coworkers, oh, you have to have a degree to work here? And I'm like, oh yeah, you totally do. I'll be sitting there you do? I don't say shit because they all know I don't, but I'm just you don't need to, right? My lived experience is what, and some of the on-the-job training I've gotten through working for different organizations have gotten me to where I'm at now in my career in this field. And because I took advantage of training opportunities, paid training opportunities, and took advantage of some free ones too in my free time. But yeah, organizations, especially in recovery, are starting to look more towards lived experience as well as an educational background right?
Yeah, it's interesting. But like you said, there was that place in Port Alberni that you're talking about where you even by that you were kind of saying well, no, I don't think it.
It was tempting because the money was good, and I could have lived on site during the week. They had a room for me there, so I wouldn't have to commute back and forth.
Maybe just for the listeners, we can kind of give the backstory of what the...
A friend of mine that I worked at Saltum Layla when I first moved to Nanaimo for 8 months as a night shift support worker, and one of my coworkers got a job at another First Nations trauma center in Port Alberni, and I guess the employment market in Port Alberni is not very vast. It's pretty shallow, and so they're really looking for people to do these jobs. And she called me up and she said they're looking for somebody to do therapy groups with a local First Nations community, and they're willing to start you at X amount of dollars. You can live on site for the week and then commute back home on the weekends. And they need somebody so bad they'll basically hire you on my say-so. And so I called the woman up, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you can start tomorrow. We'll start you at $25 an hour. Blah blah blah. We'll start to give you some training, and you'll basically be like a trauma counselor." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have a degree in trauma counseling," and she's like, "That's okay. You know, we're desperate for somebody." And so I was tempted because the starting wage is pretty decent, and they gave me benefits after 3 months. But I've got a responsibility to people that are, you know, suffering from trauma to not open up their trauma and not be able to freaking close it. Right?
Yeah.
What a buddy, like, you know, I'm like, oh, session's done for today, and he's just opened these wounds up, and he goes home and drinks himself to death.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have a moral obligation to, as a not being a clinician, to not go down that road.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're trying to navigate that. Like, on the one hand, you're saying, like, you shouldn't take on something like, especially dealing with trying to help somebody deal with their trauma, where you could actually do more damage. But at the same time, it's not like, and that's kind of what she had said in her book, was like, you know, pretending that the teachings of 12-step programs or lived experience are therapy. It's like, well, they do have a therapeutic value. And so I don't think it's that easy to dismiss them. It's just finding the right context, and like, maybe it's not the most, you know, obviously a couple of quotes or something from the big book is not going to deal with obviously that's not going to be enough to help somebody deal with their trauma and shit. But
no, and I mean, lots of people, and you guys, I'm sure it's been your experience. A lot of people I know have gone through a rigorous set of 12 steps and still have unresolved trauma, and they need to go see a therapist.
Yeah, I mean,
some people need medication because they can't work through their trauma.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme with people that we talk to, and all of our guests have been like, I go to I've sought outside help. No, we're not saying by any means that the 12 steps is a cure all for
anyone and I've heard people say it, especially when I was in Vancouver a lot, that all of the answers to all of life's problems can be solved in the 12 steps. And I'm like, that is so fucking dangerous. You need to stop fucking saying that, because that can kill people. Because I've seen it happen to people where they go through the 12 steps rigorously and they follow it to the letter, and they have a great sponsor, and they still can't find that connection. And so they think there's no other alternative, and they end up dying as a result because I can't get it. Or people say, you haven't done the work enough then, right? Like, and they fucking shame them. And they're like, oh no, you just need to do more step work. And people try and they can't get it because they have such deep-rooted unresolved trauma. They need a fucking clinician to work through that.
And that's what we're talking about, where if somebody is not trained in trauma counseling and hasn't been through severe trauma, they're just being ignorant at that point. Where it's like, the 12 steps are a part of a whatever, if you want to call it, a wellness wheel, or it's a spectrum of different tools that, you know, you can have support groups, you can have 12 steps, but you might also need counseling. You might also need, you know, whether it's trauma counseling or whatever, you might also need, you know, see a doctor for your fucking if you know what I mean, if you have mental health conditions that you might need medication for.
I always tell clients it can't hurt to go see an A&D counselor, an alcohol and drug counselor. And I said, if you get a mental health diagnosis, I always strongly encourage people to get a second opinion. And to go see a therapist or a psychologist when talking about getting medication prescribed. So you can go see a doctor at a walk-in clinic. Doctors at walk-in clinics are not actually qualified to accurately diagnose you and prescribe. They're qualified to prescribe medication. So you go in and you say, I'm anxious. They'll say, oh, I'll prescribe you medication for your anxiety. They don't know what the root cause of your anxiety is, and they're not trained to diagnose that. They're trained to prescribe you medication. So I say, if you think you have a mental health issue, go see a therapist or a psychologist and talk to them. And then you can get a proper diagnosis, and even then get a second opinion before you go on a regimen of antidepressants. Right? Go through all of the steps and get the correct information before you make make an informed decision, instead of especially people that have addiction history, right? We all want the quick solution, right? I'm anxious. Give me some for the anxiety. Oh, take these antidepressants. Oh, take antidepressants. You might need to just get to the root cause of why you're going to have anxiety.
Yeah.
You go see a therapist, you may be like, oh, well, you know, your relationship is causing you anxiety, so maybe your partner needs to come in and we have a fucking counseling session. Then you discover your anxiety is all based in your home life and your fucking toxic relationship. But instead, you took antidepressants because your fucking doctor at the clinic said, "Oh, you're fucking depressed. Take some antidepressants."
And you've been right, you know, clean and sober for a week or something.
And now you're on antidepressants, and you have fucking an antidepressant fucking dependency that might not have needed to happen if you just had taken some patience and taken the proper steps and made an informed decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that a lot of people that are just getting off of heavy drug and or alcohol abuse are gonna show a lot of symptoms of a lot of different fucking mental health concerns.
I mean, I was lucky because I was like super. I mean, I was always a happy drug addict. Really, like I always had a smile on my face, and so as soon as I got sober, I was just immediately like, you know, I'm pretty much like 90% happy guy all the time.
So I just definitely wanted to touch on this topic on the podcast was that we wanted to talk about recovery houses before we end. So yeah, I mean that kind of goes to we've been talking about the topic of qualifications, and we'd also been talking about like before we had started the podcast. I mean, I think it's your assertion, and I don't think any of us would disagree with it, that like if people are gonna have a recovery house, that they need to be trained in naloxone and have that ready to administer.
Just keep people safe. Make sure that the senior staff there is keeping the residents safe. Be accountable to people that are living there, because people that are living in sober houses are living there because they can't manage their own lives without help. So make sure there's people there that can help them manage their own lives and keep the guys safe. That's it. And we were talking about it before we went live. I mean, I don't necessarily think that recovery houses need to be regulated by the government, because oftentimes when the government starts to fund places, every time they start to fund anything or have their hand in anything, they start to change things and say you got to do this, you got to do that, and I think it can deviate from the end result. Is, you know, just try to keep people alive and help people find a better quality of life, and for some people find sobriety. But I think, you know, I've seen houses be negligent before, and you mentioned people do it for monetary reasons. You know, somebody relapses, get the fuck out, and, you know, they keep their money for the whole month, and it's a second. They get another guy in the next day, and they get a whole another month's worth of money, right? Yeah. And some of those houses, I think they're almost glad when people relapse, because they can get somebody in the next day, and they make twice the money, right? I think those places shouldn't exist, and I think that they're fucking dangerous.
Yeah, it is. That's something that's not. I think a lot of people feel that there's this, you know, there's a business aspect that people exploit in it's the recovery business. And whether it's recovery houses or treatment centers or whatever, somebody's, you know, more concerned about making the buck than being accountable to
about having a balance, I think. Because anybody that says that recovery isn't a business or they're not in it for money, I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that that's entirely true.
No, I mean, come on, like
there's nothing wrong with making money off of recovery. I mean, I think that if your heart's in it to save lives and to help people, that's where you should stay. But I mean, if you're making money doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people that fault people.
But you have to be ethical about it. Is all we're saying. Yeah.
First and foremost, your mission should be to save people's lives and help them find sobriety if that's what they're looking for, or just help them find their path in life that they're not able to find on their own. You know, if you make a profit doing that, I mean, so fucking what? That's not really any of my business.
No, I'm not saying that people shouldn't make any kind of living or
some people I know have that hardline attitude, like, if you're in a nonprofit, you shouldn't make any profit at all. It's fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? Well, okay, so you're gonna work for fucking free? Like, okay, let's.
But there's some places where it's like there's fucking 8 beds and everyone's paying like $2,500 a month, and it's like that gets excessive. Like,
I mean, I
you know what I mean? Like, are you getting like whatever that adds up to, like fucking $20,000 worth of fucking resources to the house every month? It's like,
not fucking, not really. Sitting on leather couches,
you know what I mean?
Steak every night either.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did in December. I was in Montreal and did intervention training with a guy named Earl Hightower, and he lives in California. And to some perspective, one of his clients that he had just had a wind damage to the corner of the roof of his house, just a corner, like a small corner of the roof of his house, and he got the repairs done. It was $3 million just to repair the small corner of his roof.
$3 million.
$3 million. So I don't know what the fucking house was worth, but he's like, these are the kind of clients I'm working with, right? This is the kind of money they have. One of the treatment centers that was available from one of the representatives that was at the training for a 90-day stay at their treatment center was $120,000. The first month was $65,000 for 1 month of treatment. So, perspective-wise, I can understand if you're a fucking multi-millionaire, you get multi-millionaire treatment, right? If you're living, under the poverty line, you get under the poverty line treatment. So, I mean, I kind of understand that there is a market for people to pay $2,500 a month, but I think if you're exploiting families that don't have very much money and they're spending their life savings putting their son or daughter in a $2,500 treatment center, I think that's not ethical. And I think you really need to screen your fucking clients and make sure the people that are giving you that kind of money can fucking afford it and they're fucking multimillionaires.
Yeah.
You know, but if there's some poor woman that's fucking so scared her son's gonna die of a heroin overdose that she's fucking remortgaged your house, she's giving you every last cent she worked the last 40 years for to pay your $2,500 a month fucking treatment center fee or recovery house fee, I think that's fucking bullshit. You know, and if you're someone that's in recovery doing that, like I don't know where your fucking head's at. It's fucking awful, I think. Right?
And I mean, and at the same time, I know someone who again had lots of money and was getting the most expensive treatment centers and the most expensive therapies, and at the end of the day, the thing that's been working for him the longest is just the basics of the self-realization that I need to work on my recovery every day. And it's just like, it would be nice if we could just pay a certain amount to have recovery for ourselves and for others, but it's really up to
Well, then, on the other hand, you get those people like I went through Together We Can, for some ministry funded treatment center, and then I know people that have been through Edgewood 3 times and still can't stay sober, right? Edgewood's got teams of clinicians working with their clients, right? I know guys that another friend of mine, Bob Maria, he works with celebrities and millionaire clients that go through these $120,000 treatment centers that have a team of clinicians that are assigned just to them and their recovery, and they still can't stay sober. So, there's no fucking secret formula. It's just
that's it.
It's a matter of like when you have that moment of like me sitting in Tim Hortons going, I've had a fucking enough, and then it happens. Like it happens for some of us like that. Some of us,
like, whether you call it a psychic change or a fucking emotional bond or whatever you want to label it, it's that. Change in perspective and change in the willingness of the person to and their dedication in their heart to their recovery. That's what makes the difference. And like you said, like there's no if you spend this much money you'll get it, and if you do this treatment for sure will this process or this type of therapy will guarantee it. It's just what I mean. It's just. It's one of those.
I mean, my
things.
My personal opinion is it's about connection and where you find it, and whatever that looks like. Whether it's a 12-step group or fucking yoga, or sometimes it can be love or Jesus or fucking God or whatever the fuck it is that you need to nurture that connection and feel a part of something bigger than yourself. That's what you need to do. And for some people it's not 12 steps. Some people it's I have a friend that went through AA for the first year of his recovery, took a cake, and now he's a yoga teacher, and that's what he does. He's a yoga teacher training and teaches people to do yoga, and that's where he finds his spirituality, his connection. He's not a member of AA anymore, and he's good to go. I mean, I find it my meaning and purpose for the work that I do. I rarely attend 12-step meetings anymore, and there's a few reasons. I mean, a lot of it's because I have like a crossover of clients, and I never, I don't want to incorporate my work into 12-step stuff, but I still do all of the work that I was taught to do on a daily basis within myself, right? And make sure that I'm doing the next right thing, and that I live right and I don't fucking be a greasy motherfucker, And if I've ever been a dick to somebody, I owe them an apology. That being said, I'm not perfect. I still take advantage of certain things and try my best not to. Sometimes I take liberties at work because I get to work my job with autonomy. But I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't work hard and I don't, serve my clients. While I try my best to be a good person, right? And at the end of the day, I know what I need to do if I haven't been, right? And I do that.
Yeah.
That's what I was taught to do. And if I deviate from that path, I could wind up in big trouble. One day that obsession could return. Because I know guys we talked about earlier, that 20 years sober, went out and found himself shooting cocaine one night. Like, how the fuck does that happen? You ask them and they don't know. I don't know, man. But you hear the stories, I stopped going to meetings, stopped calling my sponsor. Next thing I know, I got loaded. I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. But I mean, there is always a sequence of events that lead you up to every fucking.
Like you said, you lose the connection. You lose that commitment to your.
My opinion is the connection you lose, right?
Yeah.
And for some people, when they stop going to meetings, they lose that connection, right? Because they don't have that meaning and purpose. Right.
Well,
their meaning and purpose is giving the message to other people that are new, right?
It's the same as the moment, like you said, like where you're in Tim Hortons and you're drinking a coffee and you're like, I don't want to fucking do this, right? Like, it's not that, you know, you're not going to tell people, oh, just go down to Tim Hortons at 4 a.m. and that's what's going to happen, right?
Like, Tim Hortons have a lineup.
Yeah, it's the same thing as like the big Thanksgiving fight with your family, right? Like, you know, like you guys are arguing about fucking gravy and then it's a fist fight or some shit, right? Like it's all that fucking stuff bottling up to that moment, right? It's the same thing with the relapse, right? Where they're, oh, I don't fucking know what happened. It's like, it's the same thing.
The fucking thing for me, I mean, it was years of not wanting to live like that. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that was the first moment of like, I don't want to live like this. There was fucking lots of those moments, but for some reason that moment was the moment.
You just internalized it at that
moment.
It's
like, okay, done. It's fucking weird. I don't know why it was then and not 5 years fucking before, you know. Or the first night I realized I was locked in jail for the fucking with no choice to leave. Yeah. Right? You'd think that would have been a motivating factor, like fuck, or doing time with my dad for fuck's sake. No, guys, I remember guards and shit be like, oh, it's your dad, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, it's fucking not. Actually. Cool. And then other guys be like, it's your real dad, eh? Like, you know, I'm a jail dad, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, dude, my real dad. Like, I'm not somebody's bitch, for fuck's sake. Right? Like, you know, like, oh, that's cool, bro. Do you work out with him and shit? Like, yeah, actually, I do.
Yeah, you have a catch in there, yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, weird, man. Well, it was great hearing your story and having you come out, man. Yeah,
man. Thanks so much for coming on. I think that was a really good.
I'll definitely have you guys on my show, and we'll chat about what you guys do. And I'll
sweet.
Some promotion and shit. Yeah.
Is there anything like you would like to promote, whether it's just like a business or a cause or anything like that, or?
I don't know. I do like sober coaching and intervention for people if they want it, and I don't really do traditional interventions where I like subscribe to tough love. The work that I do with people. I try to find people's path, and because I don't know what people need. You know, I've worked with families before where their loved ones like, I don't want to stop doing heroin, right? And so I'm like, okay, how about maybe living in supported housing, or you know, getting a place to live. So we start there and start giving them their basic needs and trying to get their basic needs met. You know, I'm not someone that's going to tell somebody that needs to start going to meetings and get sober right now, but I will tell people they're going to die if they continue down the path they're on. Right, and so I've often helped people that have no money, and I help people that have lots of money too, and charge them accordingly. So I do that. People can get my services if they want. I'm in the process of rebuilding my website right now, so I'll give it to you guys when it's done. My brother's
we'll put it out. This podcast is probably going to come out. I think
like
2 weeks from now. So then you can.
No, I work for the Nanaimo Region John Howard Society in housing too. So if you know anyone that has housing needs, they can contact our office. And our program is full, but I can always direct people to resources and stuff. And I'll do my best to always take a minute, talk to people if they're homeless and looking for resources to treatment centers, different supported housing locations, or A&D counselors or whatever. Yeah,
awesome.
Well, yeah, man. Thanks for coming on and keeping it really real, dude. That was really. We covered a lot of stuff on that one. It was awesome.
Yeah, man.
It was quick.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, or if you want to reach out to be a guest in the future, you can just hit us up on highlyaddictivepodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, and YouTube, all under Highly Addictive Podcast. So thanks again for listening, guys.
Thanks, guys.